Welcome to Free to Speak, the New Zealand Free Speech Union podcast. If you enjoy the show, subscribe for uncensored conversations and free speech news from New Zealand and beyond.
Kia ora and welcome to Free to Speak, the official podcast of the New Zealand Free Speech Union. My name is Dane Giraud. I am a council member of the Free Speech Union and your host. And joining us today, graciously joining us, is a former board member of the BSA to discuss the potential de-establishment of the BSA and how that could impact minority and other communities. Pulotu Tupe Solomon-Tanoa'I. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
So again, thank you very much for coming on Free to Speak. It's a privilege to have someone that's been on the BSA. Often these fights, I say fights that the Free Speech Union have, can get a bit abstract because often the people that we are pushing back against or the organizations don't represent. And I think that's a problem because what it means is that some of our supporters don't get to understand the nuance of what goes on inside these organizations. So that's why, again, thank you very much for this. It really is an honor to have you here. So you've had a very interesting career to date. You work in the now I can't even say that.
Yeah, it's a difficult word to pronounce.
You work in the philanthropic space?
Yeah, most people who are in the philanthropic sector say they didn't know how to say the word before they started working there. So yeah, don't worry, you're in really good company. But thank you so much for having me on the podcast. And I think I just want to clarify that I'm not speaking on behalf of the BSA today, but I am speaking from my experience having been on the BSA for 4 years, having been appointed as after community consultation. So having had that experience, I've got first-hand experience of its role and value. And I really want to thank you for the opportunity to have an open discussion today and, learn a bit more about each other's worldviews.
Great. Oh, that's awesome. So maybe start by taking us through, because what I'm fascinated by is a case comes over the desk. So what is the process? How does it start? Are you able to talk us through woe to go, like how that would work and what your role would be or what other staff's role would be in that process, just so we know the mechanics and what actually happens within the BSA?
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a really good place to start because most people wouldn't know about the BSA until a controversial case hits the headlines. And I think probably a lot more people are aware of it now that it's been announced that it will be abolished. But the BSA is more than just a complaints office. So it sets standards for broadcasting together with broadcasters and in consultation with the public. And it conducted research on how media is experienced by people. And it also received or determined complaints from the public. And so when someone feels that, maybe I should start first too with what the standards are. So the standards related to accuracy, fairness, balance, discrimination and denigration, children's interests, and widespread disproportionate offence or harm. So if someone had a complaint or concern about any of those things, the first thing they would do is complain to the broadcaster. And the broadcaster would then look at those complaints. And if that member, and there was another one actually that I didn't mention, there's a privacy standard. So, and the privacy standard was the only one where people could come directly to the BSA. But for all the other standards, they had to first complain to the broadcaster, and then the BSA was like an appeal body. So if people weren't happy with the response that they got from the broadcaster, then it would come to the BSA. And if you were happy with what the BSA determined, then it could be appealed to the High Court. So there are quite a few layers of complaints, quite a few layers whereby your complaint could be considered. And I think what's important to understand, especially for the FSU, and I think this is an area where we agree, is that freedom of expression is extremely important in a democratic society. And so the threshold for intervening in freedom of expression was intentionally set high. So of the hundreds of complaints that the BSA receives every year, it only upholds a small number of complaints. So I think last year it was 8%. It usually is around 6 or 7%, which means that, the flip side of that is that in 92% of cases, it was found that it did not meet the threshold for intervening in freedom of expression. But what the BSA does is that it balances freedom of expression with the right with protection from harm.
That word harm again, is the problematic one, I think. How is it defined within the BSA? I mean, it'd be nice to have a test case or something that we could go over to maybe establish how it would be interpreted. But how would you interpret it, maybe?
The harm, so the standards themselves provide guidance to the broadcasters as to, what would constitute harm in the broadcasting context. So people are, the right to freedom of expression needs to be balanced against the right of people to not be harmed by misleading content that's inaccurate, content that denigrates sections of society. And so those are contained within the standards themselves. There are a number of different layers, as I mentioned before, where the broadcaster themselves can say whether they think, oh yes, actually we got that wrong, we breached the standard. And then it will, if the complainant is not happy, the BSA can have a look and say, actually, we think the broadcaster got that wrong, or the broadcaster actually got that right, but they did enough to address that. And then if the complainant was still not happy, they could go to the High Court. So it's, that the standards are, things that, it's not just, 4 people deciding what constitutes harm. There's quite a few layers whereby those discussions can be had.
Okay. I mean, the reason why I ask is, and this is a question that comes up with all censorship. The definition of harm can be extremely elastic. And even within my own community, say the Jewish community, we're all individually going to have different thresholds for what is harm. I mean, there are Jews that think that Israel is an apartheid state. I personally think that's one of the most harmful things you can say about Israel. It's even more harmful in the long term to me than a neo-Nazi just having a bit on X at me, because it's considered normal political discourse and probably wouldn't get hoovered up by any of these standards. And so it's almost like a slow march of creating a lot of ill will towards a community, most of us who would support a Jewish homeland in the Levant. So harm is quite subjective, wouldn't you think?
Well, that's why I think it's important to have a body like the BSA. There's been jurisprudence built up over a number of years since 1989. And, the standards that are set together with broadcasters and in consultation with the community. We have a number of decisions that, we go back to when we, making determinations on complaints. Or, I'm sorry, I'm saying we, I'm slipping back into we. I'm not part of the BSA anymore. But, when the BSA is, looking at complaints that come up, they, are looking back at previous decisions that have been made.
That have come before. So that's sort of setting, like any jurisprudence. It's like it's setting the standard of what is. Okay, well that's interesting. Well, so a concern you had, and you talked about in the I Tangata piece, is stereotypes, right? The propagation of. So how is that? Is that considered a harm potentially? How would you define that?
So the point I was making in the I Tangata article was that it was in response to something that I've heard politicians saying about what you can do about harm. So something that has been said quite often is that, well, if you don't like it, you can just turn it off. And that doesn't work for communities who have been subjected to stereotypes, because even if they turn it off, then those stereotypes are taking hold and forming other people's opinions about them. So the point I was really making there is that the media has a lot of influence and power in society. And so, I'm really making a case for, why we need a body like the BSA so that we can ensure that an entity, which is really important for a democratic society, that they're not misleading the public, that they are reporting accurately, and that they're not repeating stereotypes that can be harmful over time to certain sections of the community.
Now, the Heather du Plessis-Allan case, so what was it that she said in that case? It's just occurred to me now, I didn't plan this, but she was quite derogatory, wasn't she, against Polynesians? Was that what had happened? Am I getting that correct?
That's right. I don't really want to repeat what she said. And this decision was before my time on the BSA.
Is it that long ago? It feels like it was like 2 years ago or something.
Well, I started in 2021, and I think her case might have been in 2020 or 2019. But it was a remark that she made in relation to the Prime Minister going to the Pacific Islands Forum, which is a major meeting of Pacific leaders. And one that's, really important to the Pacific and to New Zealand, actually, in terms of our relationships with our neighbours. And she made a, dismissive and very denigrating comment, so that the BSA found that it was denigrating and harmful to Pacific people. And so, I think it is really important to have a body which sort of pulls up broadcasters to say, hey, actually, that's not right what you did there. And that can cause harm to the community by saying those sorts of things. And that's quite different from someone saying that in their living room. This is a media broadcaster who has influence in society. So that's what these protections really are for. It's for broadcasters, and to make sure that our media that has an important role in shaping views is not broadcasting denigrating or misleading or inaccurate content.
Do you think, though, and I've thought about this a lot, that a ruling is going to, I guess what you're doing with the ruling is warding them off going there again, and they'll be more careful in the future, I guess. That's the point of it. But what would be worth more in terms of community, educating people on a community? Would it be a ruling like that? Or would it be the counter speech that would come from that? Because that's what I remember. I don't remember the ruling so much as a lot of commentators pushing back, making a case on the other side, and all that kind of counter speech. So I just wonder, is censorship really moving the dial as much as counter speech would?
So one of the things, so I picked this up in our pre-conversation. So I wouldn't see that as censorship. What happened in that instance? So the BSA, I don't think the I don't think that it's a binary choice between freedom of expression and censorship. It's really about balancing between freedom of expression and protection from harm. So just to come back to your point about, what is useful for communities, I mentioned earlier that the BSA is not just a complaints office. So it sets the standards, it consults with the public, it conducts research on what people find harmful, and it also educates broadcasters and the public. So it educates broadcasters on how they can meet the standards, and it educates the public on what they can do if they feel that the standards have been breached.
Okay. Well, when you say not censorship, I mean, it is that she's not going to go there again. After having a ruling like that, because it's going to be costly, isn't it? There's a cost attached to it. So there is a punitive element to this.
Yeah, I think in that instance, I think she was fined $3,000. Well, not her personally. The broadcaster was fined $3,000. But yeah, again, it's really about how broadcasters can, meet the standards and how, they can, ensure that harm isn't done to communities. I mean, I think that that's, a challenge in democratic societies, how we can balance those tensions fairly. And I'm interested, sort of in your view, like what you think, should be done in those instances where broadcasters are, denigrating communities.
Yeah, I would probably, my personal view is that the bigger issue that we have as minority communities is that right of reply. And that's something that, I mean, in many ways, the way I would have taken that, I wouldn't have been happy about it. I would have pushed back on it. I mean, people have every right to. I'm not belittling or anything or dismissing what was said. My issue, speaking from, the perspective of being in the Jewish community, is we don't often get a right of reply. Some people can say some horrendous things and a lot of disinformation and misleading things, which doesn't actually get picked up the way it can do for a lot of other communities as well. People tend to be a bit more careful. I mean, what's interesting about the BSA's research, you say community outreach and everything. There was a survey done relatively recently, I think it was 2020, and they spoke about harm to the Muslim community and other communities, but they didn't mention the Jewish community. And I found that really kind of interesting and possibly a bit telling. In terms of racism and stats, we tend to be very high, but a lot of our government groups don't really take anti-Semitism as seriously for some reason. They don't think it's as big a deal. I mean, I know even in the Human Rights Commission, they just don't tend to view it with the same urgency. And the cynical read on that might be that a lot of people there are quite on the left or far left, who might be a bit more sympathetic to the anti-Israel narratives and therefore a lot more permissible with some of the stuff that gets through. So I worry about the balance there, but I would be happy enough with counter speech. It's not that I'm not against standards, because I think it serves a professional news organization if they have standards that they would hold to, especially today where we're going to have a lot of online commentary. What defines a mainstream serious organization from these independent podcasts and so forth? It probably should be standards. I have sympathy to the voluntary doing it in a voluntary way, people just opting in rather than it being something that they have to do. Like what happened with the platform and this reach into the internet, I think was a bridge too far, and that they were never going to be able to sustain, because I don't even know how they would have really been able to manage all of that. And there was a lot of inconsistency too. Like the platform would have qualified, but there was other streamers and so forth that wouldn't have, and it felt very selective. And I think that's where a lot of distrust started here. But the internet is the Wild West. I don't think it'll ever be properly regulated. I don't think it can be. So our best option has always really been counter-speech, and that's why minorities in the West tend to have the most rights, because they had free speech and they found platforms, even if it took decades as well to get there, you know?
Yeah, well, there's a lot in what you just said.
Too much?
Yeah, no. No, that's great. Just to respond quickly on your point about balance. So that is reflected in one of the standards. And yeah, the right of reply is important. And so your balance is one of the standards, and they take into account things like whether different perspectives were provided in either in the same broadcast, or that balance can be provided over time as well. So, you can present a particular view in one interview, but then, within the next few days, you're presenting the right of reply or a different view. So, so that's one of the standards under which people could complain. And then, so we've gone now into online regulation, and so let's talk a little bit about the case that has sparked all the controversy. And so the BSA has been the first to admit over many years that it's in need of reform, because the Broadcasting Standards Act was passed in 1989, and
it's quite archaic. It's got terms like decency and good taste and things. It's a bit.
Oh, those terms are still around, but it's archaic in the sense that technology has completely transformed the way that we consume content now. So it was set up for a different age, and the BSA has been calling for reform over a number of years, and those discussions have been going since at least 2010, and successive governments have looked at what could be done to modernise the Act, but Parliament hasn't updated the Act, so the BSA was working with the legislation that it had. And it had been saying since 2019 that if it received a complaint about a webcaster, it would consider it. And so that's what happened with the Sean Plunket case. So the decision they issued was just on jurisdiction. And in my view,
Yep.
I mean, I think that I think that's a legitimate point of debate. Whether they should have been considering a complaint about an online platform, but there were ways in place to deal with that debate. So it could have been appealed to the High Court,
But that's costly. I mean, he would, if he's appealing to the High Court, how much is that going to cost him?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, but people do appeal to the High Court.
But my concern there is that what we're seeing a lot more of now, which I'm really for, because I've worked actually with a lot of upcoming Māori and Pacific Island comedians, people that are, on YouTube and everything, and given them tips, and, even created shows for a couple of them that I've seen and been tickled by, and, and got them to Māori TV for a sit down and got to show up and everything. We're seeing more and more people from areas like our hometown of South Auckland, creating their own shows. Now, you know what it's like out there. Some of these people are rough and ready, but that's the language they're going to speak in out there. Like I accept that. I know exactly where they're coming from. A lot of people from the inner city could be extremely offended by what they hear. But the value sets and everything are very different. And these are people from Struggle Street, right? So that's what, and now they're visible. And they're visible in the way they never were before, so they're going to take advantage of stuff like this. We could have a populist stream happening out of papatui, which could be quite offensive to a few people. Now that person's not going to be able to appeal or go through a court system because they wouldn't even have a producer. It's likely to be them just doing their thing, but reaching people, and as someone who's worked in film and TV, a gripe I've had for decades is that people often talk a good game, but no one serves that audience. No one's serving the urban Māori, PI, even Pākehā from out their audience, So this is where I think this reach into, because when you talk about harms to communities, I think there's a little bit of an irony there, because what could happen is if they really had got going and there was lots of complaints against some of these streamers, then we're shutting down a lot of voices that have never had a platform before because they're going to be priced out of the game. They're never going to be able to go through a court system.
Okay. There was a lot in there as well. But if I could just...
I'm a handful. I told you I was a handful.
No, because you've touched on like so many things, but I just kind of want to address all of those points. So your first point on, well, firstly, South Auckland podcasters, awesome. I love it. I love seeing the, proliferation of voices and the diversity of voices that are popping up. That is awesome. Now, in terms of appeal, so every podcaster in South Auckland wouldn't need to go to appeal, right? So this is on a jurisdictional point that would have applied to everyone.
So you're saying streamers because it's live. Is that the distinction you're making, rather than a recorded?
I'm just saying that. So your point on appeal, right? So I was just talking about the very narrow point on jurisdiction, right? So did the BSA have jurisdiction in determining a complaint about the platform? So that was one case, but that ruling, like that clarification from the court, would have applied to all podcasters. So not everyone would have had to appeal something like that. And yes, access to justice, does have a cost. But I'm just saying that I did see people come forward and say, I'll fund the case, because they really, cared about the broader point, right? But I'm just saying, I'm not advocating for or against that. All I'm saying is that was an option. But the other option that was available was for the government to continue with the reforms that it had started, or successive governments had looked at the issue of reform. There was years of policy work and consultation that went into it. 197 individuals and organisations submitted on what they thought a modernised system, not just for the BSA, but across the media regulatory landscape could look like. And those consultations, that policy work, was put on hold last year, and nothing else happened until this case popped up, and now the BSA is going to be abolished. So I guess my point is that there were established processes that could have been carried forward to get to, it might have come to the same result. They might have said, actually, now we've reviewed everything as a result of this policy work. Actually, we think the best thing is to go to a voluntary model. And I think in terms of, good governance and good process, there would probably be less noise about, the way that things have, the way the BSA has been scrapped.
That's so. Was there any reason given for parking it? They just said we don't want to deal with it now.
Yeah, that's my understanding. It was just put on hold with no time frame for taking it forward.
See, I'm finding, being in this free speech game now, that I don't think there might be people within parties like Labour or even National who are quite sympathetic to censorship or regulation, but clearly they do worry about it politically. coming into the Free Speech Union, I would have been surprised by that. I would have thought that Kiwis would have been a bit more open to this type of stuff and would have gone along with it more, but we're not. And we've become a bit of an outlier in the West, actually. Like, we're closer to the US now than Australia when it comes to freedoms. We have a lot of freedoms in this country that are not in the EU, are not in the UK. Like the Mikey Sherman case that's happened, right? In the UK, she could have feasibly been investigated and arrested over that. I mean, that's wacky to me. I mean, that's just absolutely off the charts. But we don't have anything. We're nowhere near that censorial estate. So,
So hang on, wait a minute. Sorry, I don't know enough about the UK system, but what, she could have been arrested over a private matter that was dealt with a year ago, and
she could
apologized
have been
for.
investigated by their police, yeah, just for saying that in a public space like that. In Parliament. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that she would have been prosecuted, she would have gone through the whole system or anything like that, but the way their laws are, she could have had a visit from the police. I mean, a visit from the police is enough, isn't it? I mean, if you get a knock on the door about things you've said, even if they say just watch yourself and leave again. I mean, that's horrible.
Yeah,
but we don't have that here, like, wow. Our police shouldn't be doing it. Sometimes they do it. They shouldn't actually be doing it. But my point is that we are a bit of an outlier now. And I think that even though even Labour won't maybe say it as much publicly, I think they're quite cautious about regulation and censorship now. I think the horses have been a bit scared by this. That would be my sense.
Yeah, well, I, don't really want to comment on, what transpired, because, Mikey took responsibility for that a year ago and it was resolved privately.
I was making a point just with the whole, what's legal and what's not. I mean, I feel very bad for her, actually. I don't think she should have lost her job over that. I mean,
I saw the FSU statement on that, and I thought that was really measured, because I do think that in a free and democratic society, people should be able to apologise and when they have made a mistake. And I think I would like to add my voice to the chorus of concern over the way that Mikey was treated and the online pile-on that happened afterwards. And I think that's probably a good segue into one of the things I think we're not talking about enough in this country, which is that a lot of the harm is happening to people online. And I think that is something that we really need to think about, is that we haven't really had a conversation about online harms and accountability, and what happens with algorithmic amplification and harassment online. I think that democracies that we liken ourselves to, like Australia, they're doing some things in that space which we are nowhere near, having that conversation here. So, in Australia, they have an e-safety commissioner, which deals with cyberbullying, image-based abuse, harmful online content, and platform accountability. And I think that that's something we should be talking about more here.
Yeah, there's always that issue of it becoming politicized, though. I think a lot of this stuff. I'm sympathetic to the. I get abuse. We got abuse as a free speech union for defending drag queen story time in public libraries. I got some horrendous messages. It's like they loved me yesterday, but not today. It was a bit like that. It does happen. I think for women in politics, I noticed that Tori Whanau is, she went, was it to the Waitangi Tribunal to talk about abuse online and everything. We got to be careful there too, because I think that I wonder, if I had a solution that was intrusive for something like that, if it was like gun to your head, you got to do something, Dane, in the space, right? Because I am almost an absolutist when it comes to free speech. I would lose anonymous accounts. That's the way I'd deal with it. I just don't think that it's like because a lot of these, if Tory whānau's getting an abusive text or social media message, that to me would be akin to a crank call, back in the old phone call days, when kids would call you up, Bart Simpson, at the bar, calling up, and we'd never defend that as free speech. So when someone jumps on my thread and says something anti-Semitic, and then and I don't know who they are, they've just got a swastika as their, profile picture or something like that, I'll block them straight away most of the time. But it's hard to defend that as free speech, That to me that's more like a crank call. So that's how I would do it. I think that we'd naturally clean up. I'm in my own, I put my name out there. I'd never go behind a anonymous account. I don't know why people do. A lot of them say, well, because I don't want to jeopardize my job and things like that. That's fine, I guess. And that is a case. We don't want to jeopardize our employment. But should you be, why would you want to attack other people behind an anonymous account? It just feels so cowardly to me, it's like if you've got some strident criticism you want to give Tory whānau, she was elected, she democratically elected, you should be able to feed back, but not behind an anonymous account, like that to me is where a lot of the problem comes in. I think it would naturally clean up. There are things I wouldn't say, because I'm in my name, my neighbor's out there. So, and I'm still open with my thoughts and everything, but I moderate a little because the way I do when I'm walking down the street, it's really no different, So that would be where I'd go with it if I had to go there. But, I'm sympathetic to the whistleblower, protections for whistleblowers and all that side of it as well. But that could be, that might be how I'd attack that. Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting idea, because I do think it's easy to be a keyboard warrior when you haven't identified yourself, right? But I think what I'm more interested in and what other democracies are, grappling with is the responsibility that platforms have, for online harms, because, just like looking at some of the things our kids have been watching, they've seen massacres and stuff like that, because it gets amplified really quickly through the algorithms, because people are shocked and, they press angry emojis and stuff like that. And the algorithm responds more quickly to those things. So really harmful, things get shared very quickly before the platforms, have even been able to be aware that, that stuff was happening. So, I think, rather than policing, it's not about, every individual. It's like, what are the platforms doing to keep their consumers safe?
Yeah, because with the algorithms, I guess, I've found it before, if I get upset about an anti-Semitic comment, I might comment on and push back on a thread or something. But then I get 5 or 6 different accounts like that turn up because the algorithms decided, he likes this.
Yeah, and it's like, no, I just pressed angry emoji.
I know.
Don't show me more.
I don't I had a horrible one the other day where I did an interview with Peter Boghossian, who we've brought over here from the States, and he was saying that people are overcorrecting due to the last 5 years of relative suppression and cancel culture and things, and that there's a guy who walks around, his whole channel is him walking around Tennessee or a place like that, going up to black guys and saying the N-word, and provoking them. That's his whole channel. And
That's
he was
awful.
like, yeah, awful. And he's like, I don't know how this guy hasn't been shot yet. And I saw it once and was like, this guy's just horrendous. But then, yeah, every two posts was this guy. It's like, oh, you want to see this guy?
No,
you know?
I don't.
And I didn't want to see that guy. I just couldn't really believe it in a way, you know what I mean? So I checked it out, but then it came back and it was there. And but again, I mean, if we were putting the power in people's hands to say, I don't want this algorithm. I want to change this. This is what I want to get. This is what I want to see. This is what I don't want to see. And it held to that. But I guess what are they doing? Are they looking for new audiences? Are they're rewarding? I mean, they've got their own sort of system of virality in spreading these clips, haven't they? Which is problematic.
Yeah, I mean, I have to preface my comments by saying that I'm not an expert in this. I just would really like to see, more of a conversation happening about what can be done about online harm. And that was a major gap that was identified in the policy work that had been done previously by successive governments. So it was a real pity that that work was shelved. But seeing as the government is, going to scrap the BSA and will have to introduce new legislation, I'm really hoping that we do have a conversation about that and we have, public consultation on what will replace the BSA.
Yeah, see, I'm a little bit sussed on public consultation, to be honest.
Why is that?
Well, I am, because I think that our communities are incredibly diverse. And I noticed, like, with the Christchurch call, there were a couple of people in our community that were invited to be a part of it. But they were heavily pro-censorship people. And our community is not actually heavily pro-censorship. I really do worry that the majority, those in power sometimes, they handpick the members of minority groups that they think are going to give them the narrative they want. I think that happens quite a bit, actually. I think it's a real concern. It's really easy to say, well, here's the person that's going to agree with me, platform that person and say they speak for everyone, but they often don't. All our communities are really diverse, and it doesn't help us because what is a stereotype? It's the idea that these communities aren't diverse, and you would know. I mean, it's like there's going to be a range of. I mean, the working poor tend to be more pro-free speech. So you go into an area like South, you're going to find more people that are going to be sympathetic. Because why? Because they've been denied a voice for so long. You can game it. That's my problem. I think you can game it a little bit. And the other side of the coin is like a lot of people are just getting, they work at Alexis Tamaki and they're not going to get involved in this. They're just head down, bum up, They're not political. They're not going to think about it. But it could end up affecting their children or something like that. It could, affect their ability to be able to speak. So that would be my concern there. Yeah, with that. I want the public involved, but I don't know how to get the diversity of opinions in there. That would be my concern.
Yeah, I mean, two things you've touched on that I'd like to comment on. I just want to reiterate that I do think free speech is incredibly important and a fundamental pillar of a democratic society. What the BSA is about is balancing the rights and dignity of others with that very important tenet of democracy. And then picking up on your apprehension about consultation processes, and I do think that maintaining public trust and bringing people along is incredibly important. And I think when it appears as though consultation has been selective or only certain voices are being listened to, that's when public trust starts to erode. And we're living at a time when trust in public institutions is falling. And I agree with you that consultation does need to be, for everyone, and that when people take the time to engage in these processes, and we've seen like Kiwis do that quite frequently over the past few years, marching to Parliament in great numbers, submitting so many submissions that have crashed the Parliament website, all those kinds of things. When people take the time out of their busy lives to submit their views and opinions, then it's really important that it's reflected how, like, in the decision, like no matter what the decision is, because it might not be in favour of what those people had asked for, but that people know that their opinion was considered and they know how it contributed to the outcome that, eventually was decided upon.
Yeah, it's interesting, because when I saw, it's not that I was jealous that I wasn't on the Christchurch call, but, when I saw who was up there, I was like, oh, bro, it's like, oh, man. But look, so just on David Harvey, so and what he came up with, he's a really interesting guy, and we've had him, he's a friend of the Free Speech Union, and he was behind some of the drafting of the Harmful Communications Act and things like that. So he's a, very, very smart man who's done a lot of, good work in the space and is very thoughtful about it. So I've just sort of summarized where he was at with the whole idea of it being voluntary. Now, you would oppose that broadly, would you? If like the BSA got absorbed into a media council and it was more of a voluntary thing, so we wouldn't be looking at podcasts and streamers and the streamer from South Auckland or anything like that. It would be the media, like the mainstream media, that was subject to this. How would you feel about a voluntary system like that?
Yeah, so David shared his paper with me on LinkedIn.
Oh, nice.
Yes, yeah. My view is that, I think that was one of the ideas that was considered during the consultation process that had taken place earlier. That, as part of that, policy reform. I think it needs to be the result of, robust policy work, consultation, and I think if it had come about as a result of, that work, being seen to its, fruition, then, it would feel a lot more different than scrapping the BSA on the basis of one controversial decision. One
controversial decision and a move, it seeed to broaden their remit quite significantly.
So one controversial decision about jurisdiction. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, there are processes in place where it could have, been dealt with, and it's not as if the decision came out of the blue. They'd been asked, saying for some time reform is needed. And, they'd signalled in 2019 that if they did get a case like that, they would consider it. I think that model of voluntary participation has its pros and cons. And, the major con is that it only captures the people who actually do want to abide by the rules and, who believe in the standards. But then you'll have a whole group of people who are like, oh, well, actually, it's expensive because self-regulation, we've got to, pay. We won't need to pay that money if we just decide not to participate. So it creates gaps. Right, because then not everybody's playing by the same rules.
No, not everyone's playing by the same rules. I think David, don't want to speak for him, but I think he's assuming that if you were a TVNZ or a Herald or a Stuff or creating content like that, you would want to be a part of it to prove your standards. Like that would be the mark of your professionalism. If you're an independent streamer, you're an independent streamer. people can look at you and say, well, this person's going to have limited resources. A lot of what they say might not be accurate. We just have to accept that if I watch it. This would be the definition. There'd be quite a clear line between who could be trusted and who we might need to take with a grain of salt. And I know that some people are going to not know that and just believe the independent person, but would they be swayed by a media ruling anyway if you're in that down that rabbit hole? I don't know if you would be,
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not so much that they'd be swayed by a particular ruling. It's just that if you have to abide by standards, then, already you're making sure that your content is balanced. It's not misleading. It is accurate. And yeah, so basically the voluntary system will leave, we'll still leave gaps. And already there is a huge gap, with all of the online content. And yeah, I mean, people, like sort of as you say, I mean, I think people trust the people that they're listening to. They might not trust media in general, but they will trust the person who comes up on their feed every day. So, I mean, and that's the risk, is that, if there's no standards for, or no responsibility for platforms to ensure that, their webcasters are not webcasting harmful content, we're just back to square one. We still have the same still the same problem, and that is huge gap between where people are getting their information and what's being regulated.
Hey, so, well, we've been talking a while, but I want to end on a slightly controversial note.
Okay.
I did notice in your tangata piece that you talked about how misgendering was being addressed now in with the BSA. Now, I mean, I'm sympathetic to trans people, but I wonder, is that an ideological, are you entering an ideological space at that point? Because this is quite a contested issue with a lot of feminists and people taking issue with it. So making a ruling one way there is sort of making a decision on quite a highly contested live issue, don't you think? Like, how would you defend that?
Well, I think that, we live in a very diverse society, and, part of our social contract is that we need to find a way for all of us to live together. And ultimately, it's about the kind of society that we want to be. So we want a society where people can express themselves freely, but also we want a society where we should be recognising our shared responsibilities to one another. So these are difficult questions, but I think democratic societies are supposed to wrestle with these difficult questions thoughtfully. So, I mean, if you have a look at the guidance that the BSA has provided on misgendering, that's really just about, being respectful to other people.
Yeah. But of course, the other side, if they had their own stream, they could get pinged, but they would think that they were presenting a legitimate political perspective from their position as activists, and that even biological truth was on their side. You know what I mean? So it does, but I understand the respect thing, but that feels quite ideological. It feels like a hard one to wade into and probably not a wise one to wade into. That would be my feeling on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that the BSA wades into things, without being asked to determine a complaint. So that cropped up because they were receiving complaints about particular things. I think, for example, referring to people with cervixes. there was a complaint about that, and the BSA found that was not, I can't remember actually which standard that was complained against, but that it was accurate to describe people as people with cervixes, because there were people who had transitioned who had cervixes who still needed to receive medical treatment. And so, yeah, I mean, it's, the way I see it is that, that our society is, societal expectations are changing. Our society is becoming more diverse, and how do we, in a pluralistic society, find a way that we can live together and still uphold, freedom of expression, but also respect the rights and dignity of others.
Yeah, that's a topic where compromise needs to be found, but I just don't know where they're going to find that common ground. It's really tricky. It's really tricky. One more. So the vexatious, is it the word I'm looking for? Vexatious litigant. Did you have anything, were you getting, did you ever, I mean, this might be board business that you can't really get into, but would there have been, what stopped people really abusing the system by just hammering certain platforms or programs? That would be another concern too. Like, I noticed when the hate speech laws were in play, there were a lot of people online saying, it's okay, guys, wait till the hate speech laws are here. We're going to go after that person. So there are people that want to weaponize these things, and we've got to have our eyes open to that. Did you have any way to sort of address that? Or if the same name was sending in complaint after complaint after complaint, did you just have to neutrally go, well, it's here, we have to consider it?
So the complaints process is designed to be, free and accessible, and with as little formality as possible. I think, but I can't recall off the top of my head, that there might be guidelines for complainants if their complaint exceeds a certain word limit. But
here's my complaint.
Yeah. But, by and large, it's meant to be as user-friendly as possible. There were times when the BSA might decline to determine a complaint, and that would be because they felt that the broadcaster had addressed it already. Well,
the people complaining about te reo Māori, like, would there be,
yes.
there'd be people that just would go on and on and on, like the same people, like even I think the person that complained against Sean at the platform did a few of them. So they've got it in for him, like that's kind of clear. They've got it in for him. That's what I mean. Are there people out there that are going to abuse that system, and how would you address that?
So for te reo Māori, the BSA made a decision, I think it was in 2020, that it would no longer receive complaints on te reo Māori because it's an official language of New Zealand. So therefore, it's not offensive for broadcasters to be speaking our national language on TV or on radio. So we still received, people still wanted to complain about te reo Māori, but we wouldn't determine complaints on that.
What's the complaint?
I didn't
understand this. I mean, what's the...
Yeah. So I find it really interesting, right? Because I've lived overseas for 10 years, and most other places I've lived, they speak at least 2 languages. Yeah. And, I think, and also I grew up in an era where we learnt how to count. We did the greetings, like we learnt pronunciation and all of that kind of stuff. So it's just kind of second nature, I think, to a lot of New Zealanders sort of a certain like age and demographic, for us to be, speaking both te reo and, maybe not fluently, but, just, I think New Zealand's a kind of place where we do use te reo words without translation a lot, and so I think it's part of the character of our country.
Hey, Free Speech Union, Te reo Māori, more speech, more free speech. Yeah. Hey, Pulotu, thank you so much for the time you've given us today. I think it was a good discussion. Really enjoyed it. And having you here was is going to be really good for our supporters to get a good sense of what happens inside the BSA and your positions and why this is important to you. I think this has really added nuance, much needed nuance to the discussion. So I thank you again for joining us here on Free to Speak.
Well, thanks so much, Dane. I've really enjoyed the exchange of views.
Thank you for listening to Free to Speak. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and consider sharing the podcast with others. We release new episodes regularly, and subscribing is the easiest way to stay up to date. If you have any questions, feedback or suggestions, you can contact us at podcast@fsu.nz. If you want to find out more about the New Zealand Free Speech Union, visit fsu.nz.